Right, so I'm just about to dismantle the clutch to see what we've got inside and to see if it needs machining, because if it does, then obviously I'll take it down to be machined with the other parts. So we've got a clutch that has obviously recently been taken apart, but it's got no lock tabs on the bolts that hold it down. But what they've done instead is they've put spring washers underneath each nut, which is a sort of novel way of doing things. I'm assuming that for some reason they couldn't get hold of the lock tabs, or they couldn't wait for the lock tabs, or whatever it was, so they resorted to this method. Obviously the trouble with that is you've got less thread going in, because there's a huge amount of force applied, on these. So let's see, obviously it's cleared the housing, but yeah, not recommended, but anyway, that's what's been done. What we haven't got any sort of marks, any sort of balance marks on the pressure plate where the pressure plate joins the basket. So there's some sort of mark there, I don't know what that's for. And obviously we've got a starter ring on this because it's a T160. There's the starter ring, that's what the starter engages with. Anyway, but it's not marked for balance. When I take it apart, there is a mark there, but that's on the pressure plate, so I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem to be balanced. But again, it does seem to have an uprated bearing fitted in what looks like a fairly new clutch plate. So obviously it's been taken apart and done at some point, but strangely sort of done well with an uprated bearing and so on. But then with these bolts with the spring washers underneath, so it's all a bit strange, and it doesn't seem to be marked for balance. I will mark it before I take it apart, between the pressure plate and the basket, because that can go back in a number of different positions, and it can be unbalanced, and then you get a lot of vibration at high speed. So I'll mark it, so that if all else fails, I'll probably put it back in the same position as it's in now. And I'll see if the engineers can balance it, but I don't know that they can if we take it down for work. Anyway, I'll mark it. I'll put some Tipex on between the two, so I know where it came out, the way it came out. Then we'll take it apart and see what we've got inside and make decisions after that. Okay, I've undone all the nuts using my little electric thing, which is great. All the bolts rather, so I'll take those out. Just check the threads, they're all looking good. I mean, it's in steel, so there's little chance of the threads being stripped in the steel. So then we've got the cover plate. Looks good. So that's coming off. Then we've got the actual diaphragm spring itself. And of course, there's only one spring, a single spring, in the Triumph clutch. I'm just checking what we've got there. We've got a little bit of oil, a little bit of grease just on the bearing surfaces, so that's okay. Then we've got the actual pressure plate itself, which weighs a ton, and is you see the engine's been sitting, I think, for a while, and the pressure plate, there it comes. Oh, now the clutch plate is still stuck. It's come off. See if I can persuade that clutch plate to let go. The clutch plate is now stuck to the pressure plate. Come on. Let's tap it off. Find something. Just needs tapping off. Take too much. Famous last words. Take too much, he said. There we go. Oh wow. Okay. So we've got a fairly new clutch plate, I think, but there's definite signs of oil contamination on this. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but that's all sticky and you know, it's all shiny with the oil. And it's I've not seen one of these before. It's there's no rivets in it. It's obviously just bonded, stuck on. Sureflex, yeah, well-known company. Yeah, so there's oil contamination. There's oil got into the. Now, is that an uprated bearing? I can't work it out. I think it is. So I'm not sure if this is the uprated bearing that. I'm not sure. I think it is. Sorry, I'm not sure if it's the uprated bearing that is at an angle, or it's just a new bearing that's sealed, so it looks like an angled bearing. You know, obviously it's not the original, but I think it is a standard bearing rather than an uprated bearing that I would recommend to fit. That's at a slight angle. I'll try tapping it out before. I'll try tapping it out later, and either the centre will come out because it is an uprated bearing, or the whole bearing will come out. Right, looking at it, I mean, my main concern is the oil contamination. Oil has somehow got into the clutch, which it shouldn't have done, which means probably that the oil seals in the primary chain case have failed. There are two oil seals, one on the end of the clutch push rod and one on the inner, I don't know where it is, it's on the inner chain case, yeah, to stop the oil in the primary chain case getting through into the clutch. And I think that one of those has failed. So looking at it, I'm going to take it down and see if I can get it machined. It looks fairly flat, but I don't think it's been machined before. So I will take it down and see if I can just give them a very light skim, and also the fingers, give them a skim to make sure they're totally parallel with the bottom face of the clutch basket. Just give it a very light skim just to make sure everything's flat. Then the clutch plate, I think I would probably recommend, I'm not sure about this, any views, any thoughts, gratefully received, that this is now contaminated with oil. Can it be reused? Can I just use some white spirit? Will that get the oil off? Or has the oil now sunk into the clutch plate, meaning that, you know, it will carry on slipping? When I say carry on slipping, it might, you know, tendency to slip now it's got oil contamination. So, you know, I'm not sure. But yeah. So I'll take some advice on that one. But I mean, the clutch, you know, looks okay. Just we're going to skim. I'm going to check that bearing, which I think is actually a standard bearing. It's just a new bearing, but it's just standard. It's not an uprated bearing. We'll skim the face of the pressure plate. We'll skim the basket, and we'll skim the fingers on top of the basket. And then, if possible, I'll see if they can balance these two. In other words, working out which is the best position, because there are three lugs that can go in three different ways on the clutch basket. See if they can work out which would be the optimum position to avoid vibration. Okay, so I'll stop there for a minute. I'll clean up and then I'll have a look at that bearing and see whether I think it's standard or uprated bearing. Okay, I've had a look at this bearing now, and it is indeed the uprated bearing that is fitted, which is good news, because what happens is you can only drive the inner race. So I drove down on the inner race using a suitable size socket, and sure enough, instead of the bearing moving, just the inner race came out, and you can see it's a slight top hat bearing. You know, it's got one edge on it because it's designed to have that sideways thrust on it, unlike the originals. So that's good. It's got the uprated bearing. The bad news is, I think we've mentioned this before, that what you should do before fitting these bearings is drill 2 holes in this thrust plate. So I can't. Damn, the name's gone. The name's gone. You know what I mean? Cover plate, pressure plate. That's the one. Drill 2 holes in line with the outer race of the bearing, so that you can, if you ever need to replace this bearing, you can drift it out. Because, as we've just seen, if you try and drift it out just by pushing on the inner race, just the inner race will come out, leaving the outer race. Now, how do you now get that outer race out if you need to replace? Nightmare. Because of course heating, this is steel, so it will heat, it will expand and contract about the same rate as the bearing. So that's not going to help us. We can't get anything in to sort of prise it. Be hard work. I mean, the good news is that it should really not need replacing. But that's the reason why you do drill those 2 holes if you're going to fit this uprated bearing, because the only way of drifting it out is by pressing on the inner race. And with these uprated bearings, the inner race simply comes out and leaves the outer race sitting in the pressure plate, and it's a bit of a nightmare to get out. Luckily, we're not going to have to try to do that, because I'm sure some fairly new bearing by the look of it. Everything looks fine. I'll probably just stick a bit of grease there, just add a bit of grease to it, and then I'll pop the inner race back in again, and that should be it. And there we go. I just greased it up a bit, add a little bit of grease to it, back in, and all good. That was Costa Zafiri, by the way, who told me about drilling those 2 holes in the back of here. So I just need to wipe some of this excess grease now out of the way. Yeah, Costa Zafiri, I think it's in Canada. But you get to know people through Facebook and that, which is some of the positive things of Facebook and positive things of the internet, unlike so many sort of downsides to it. But yeah, so thanks to Costa for telling me about that. Okay, so that's the clutch about done, and I'll take the basket and the pressure plate down to the engineers with the cylinder head and barrels, etc., to see if they can just give them a light skim, and then we'll look at possibly replacing this clutch plate. I think so. I think it looks like it might be impregnated with the oil. I don't think we can get it out, but I'm open to thoughts on that. Okay, well, clutch done for now.